I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Lars Roque Rasmussen, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Denmark.
First of all, I would like to thank Assistant Secretary General Jenka for his informative briefing. 10 days ago, in this chamber, Denmark's representative expressed our condemnation of the violations of Poland's airspace by Russian military drones. And within 4 days, another Russian military drone incursion took place, this time into Romanian airspace. Denmark condemns the violation of the territorial integrity of Romania. And today we meet again, yet again, to discuss a reckless and dangerous violation by Russia, with 3 fighter jets entering Estonia's airspace last Friday. For 12 minutes and penetrating 10 kilometers deep north of Tallinn, until escorted out of Estonian airspace by NATO jets. Let there be no doubt, I condemn this latest violation of Estonia's sovereignty and territorial integrity by Russia. Our support for Estonia remains steadfast. Our resolve to stand by our allies remains equally firm. Together with EU partners and NATO allies, we will continue to offer support to Estonia in protecting its borders. Mr. President, these are reckless and dangerous escalations and provocations by the Russian Federation. These are threats to intimidate countries to stop supporting Ukraine and to test our resolve. Russia clearly feels it can act with impunity in Ukraine, the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea, the whole of Eastern Europe. Denmark and its allies will not be provoked by Russia. On the contrary, it only strengthens our resolve and further intensifying our long-standing support to Ukraine, whatever threats are made. We have seen this playbook before. The invasion of Georgia, the annexation of Crimea, the invasion of the Donbas, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russia's neighbors, not unreasonably, fear there could be the next. Denmark stands fully behind Estonia's territorial integrity. The Russian provocations must end immediately. Therefore, we tell the Russian Federation today, step back, take another path. We will not allow the unraveling of the European security architecture. We will not allow Russia to project chaos and uncertainty wherever it wants. And more broadly, these recent air incursions undermine the fundamental pillars of international law that we all benefit from. Mr. President, when the UN was created 80 years ago, the aim was to stop larger states from bullying and terrorizing smaller states, to create an order in which all countries are sovereign, where their territorial integrity is respected. Denmark remains fully committed to these principles. I thank you.
His Excellency Mr. Rasmussen for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Georgios Gerapatritis, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Hellenic Republic.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I would like to thank the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Korea for convening the important emergency meeting. I would like also to thank Assistant Secretary General Jenka for his insightful briefing, and I welcome the participation of fellow foreign ministers and deputy foreign ministers, as well as of the High Representative of the European Union and Vice President Ms. Kallas in this meeting. Dear colleagues, as this organization celebrates the 80th year since its establishment, international order, peace and security are gravely challenged around the globe. It is therefore our urgent and imperative duty to heighten our vigilance and intensify our efforts to meet and contain these challenges, protect international peace and security, and avoid escalations. Only in this way we will be fulfilling the core task of the Security Council. In the course of these last 2 weeks, NATO and EU's airspace has been violated 3 times, as Russian aerial means entered, contrary to international law, the territory of Poland, Romania, and Estonia. The latest incident involving the incursion of Estonian airspace by 3 armed Russian fire jets cannot be viewed in isolation. Reckless acts of this kind are not new, but their successive recurrence indicates they are not mere coincidences. As the saying goes, once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, 3 is a pattern. Greece unequivocally condemns the violation of Estonia's, and for that matter, any member state's airspace. We stand in full solidarity with Estonia, a friendly country and an EU and NATO ally. Any violation of state borders, be it air, sea, or land borders, constitutes a clear and blatant breach of international law and the UN Charter and is unacceptable, particularly coming from a permanent member of the Security Council. We call on Russia to cease these unlawful acts immediately and respect its obligations under international law. Colleagues, it is evident that this new escalation is a direct result of Russia's war in Ukraine. Greece has welcomed President Trump's initiative for meeting President Putin in Alaska in August, as well as any initiative that could result in the termination of the war. Nevertheless, these violations, as acts of aggression, contradict the spirit of the Anchorage meeting. Lastly, dear colleagues, we're now witnessing the destabilizing effects of the war and its wider implications for the security of Eastern Europe and of the wider region. This is why, once again, we call on Russia to stop its armed aggression. A comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine, based on the principles of sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of states, must remain our foremost goal. A peace safeguarded by credible and robust security guarantees, which will effectively deter any recurrence of armed aggression, that precludes further escalation, and that is in line with international law, the UN Charter, the General Assembly resolutions, and the Helsinki Final Act. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Gerapatritis for the statement. And I give the floor to Her Excellency Mr. Yvette Cooper, MP, Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the Assistant Secretary-General for that briefing. For 3.5 years, the world has witnessed a permanent member of this Council engaged in the full-scale and unprovoked invasion of another state, a violation of its most basic obligations under the UN Charter. As President Trump and President Zelensky have worked for peace, the Russian Federation has starkly escalated its attacks. Attacks on the Council of Ministers, on the British Council building, and repeated attacks on residential flats and homes as children sleep in their beds. And we meet today now at the request of Estonian allies because Russia's recklessness is escalating. In the last 2 weeks alone, over 20 Russian drones in Polish airspace, a drone through Romanian territory, and now 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets with their transponders turned off, violating Estonian airspace for 12 minutes. At best, these latest acts are dangerous and reckless. At worst, they are a deliberate attempt to undermine the territorial integrity of sovereign nations and European security. They risk miscalculation. They open the door to direct armed confrontation between NATO and Russia. NATO's combined strength is unparalleled, and its determination to defend peace and security in Europe is unshakable. Of this, Russia must be in no doubt. And I commend the resolute and firm response of Estonia, Poland, and Romania, and all NATO allies. I welcome the launch of Eastern Sentry on 12th of September to ensure the safety and security of the Alliance's eastern border, and I'm proud that UK aircraft are taking part. And to those nations and to all NATO allies, I say, the United Kingdom stands in full solidarity with you at this time and always. And to President Putin, I say, your reckless actions risk a direct armed confrontation between NATO and Russia. Our alliance is defensive, but be under no illusion. We stand ready to take all steps necessary to defend NATO's skies and NATO's territory. We are vigilant and we are resolute. And if we need to confront planes that are operating in NATO airspace without permission, then we will do so. The United Kingdom stands by our friends. We are unwavering in our support for the principles of the UN Charter, for our NATO allies, and for Ukraine. And we are committed to increasing the pressure on Russia until it ends its illegal war against Ukraine, ceases its reckless acts, and respects the sovereignty of other states. Russia's imperialist warmongering is a threat to international peace and security. It is a threat to the values and principles that underpin this organization that has done so much to support stability and prosperity these past 80 years. We must counter it for the sake of us all. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Cooper for her statement. And I give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Melita Gabric, Deputy Minister for Foreign and European Affairs of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also want to thank the Assistant Secretary General, Mr. Miroslav Jenča, for your important contribution. Excellencies, we are meeting here for the second time in just 10 days due to the reckless behavior of the Russian Federation that poses a threat to international security. 10 days ago, we discussed a drone incursion into Polish airspace, an incident involving more than 20 drones, making a significant escalation in scale and intensity. Today, we are addressing a new provocation, Russian fighter jets' incursion into Estonian airspace, an incident that was not merely momentary, but deliberate and dangerous. Slovenia supported the call for this meeting, and we stand firmly and without reserve with Estonia, its security, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Excellencies, let me say this in no uncertain terms. We condemn this escalation. At a time when tensions are already dangerously high, this is not the moment for military provocation. This is a high time for dialogue, a high time for diplomacy. When we previously discussed the drone incursion into Poland, our ambassador spoke of the growing unease with which we are witnessing such behavior across Europe. Let us be honest with ourselves around this very table of the Security Council. These actions do not occur in a vacuum. They are unfolding as we are well in the 4th year of Russia's illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. These deliberate provocations are symptomatic of the time we live in, a time in which violations of international law are tolerated to an extent we have not seen in modern history. Slovenia says a clear and principled no to such behavior, wherever it may occur and whoever may be the perpetrator. If we can clearly say no to Israeli atrocities committed in Gaza, to terrorist violence, we must not shy away from condemning Russian aggression against Ukraine. Excellencies, let us also be clear on another matter. Europe wants peace. Europe wants a ceasefire, and we want to see the beginning of serious and meaningful peace negotiations between Ukraine and the Russian Federation as soon as possible. Despite the best efforts by President Trump in Alaska, we still await a meaningful gesture from Russia, a sincere willingness to come to the negotiating table. And while we wait, Russia continues its escalatory behavior, intensifying attacks on Ukrainian cities and endangering and intimidating civilians, both in Ukraine and in its neighboring countries. We hope the time is near when this Council will finally begin a principled and honest discussion about the war in Ukraine and decide to take action. Until then, and allow me to repeat this, Slovenia will stand firmly with Estonia, with Ukraine, and with any other member of this organization that needs to be protected from unlawful, charter-violating actions by those who believe that might makes right. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Gabric for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to begin by thanking Assistant Secretary General Mr. Miroslav Jenča for his statement, and I would like to welcome the ministers present here, Foreign Affairs Minister of Estonia and from the other representatives from the European Union, and Madam Kallas. As we know, on the morning of 19th of September, Russia violated Estonian airspace with 3 fighter jets, which remained there for nearly 12 minutes. These elements lead us to consider that this is an intentional violation. This is the 3rd time in 10 days that Russia has violated the airspace of the European Union and NATO. This latest incursion leaves no room for doubt. Russia is choosing escalation and provocation. Mr. President, this Council had already met exactly 10 days ago to discuss the unacceptable intrusion of around 20 Russian drones into Poland in the context of a massive aerial attack against Ukraine. This new violation, this time carried out in broad daylight and by no fewer than 3 fighter jets, not drones, is unprecedented in over 20 years. It confirms the continuation and accumulation of Russia's provocative actions. Mr. President, France condemns in the strongest terms this dangerous and irresponsible incursion, which constitutes a blatant violation of international law. And we stand firmly alongside Estonia, to whom we express our friendship and our full and unwavering solidarity. France directly contributes to Estonia's security. We participate in the strengthening of our security posture on Europe's eastern flank, alongside our allies in the European Union and NATO. Mr. President, we must not forget that at the same time, Russia continues its war of aggression against Ukraine. Just hours after this incursion, it once again carried out massive strikes against Ukraine using 40 missiles and over 550 drones. Russia must understand that these violations of NATO airspace in no way undermine our determination to implement strong, robust, and credible security guarantees in favor of Ukraine. Mr. President, Ukraine courageously accepted 6 months ago now the principle of an unconditional ceasefire. It has demonstrated its willingness to negotiate. President Volodymyr Zelensky has, for the past 4 months, expressed his readiness for direct negotiations with President Vladimir Putin. Yet, as world leaders gather here in New York to mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, such a meeting has still not taken place. Russia, on the contrary, continues its aggression, and Russia is now escalating its intimidation of Ukraine's neighbors. It continues to violate and undermine the principles of the UN Charter, the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of states. It is up to Russia to seize the offer of a ceasefire and the opening of negotiations, as called for by the UN Secretary-General and the entire international community. Mr. President, it is our responsibility as members of the Security Council to acknowledge the obvious and to call upon Russia to end these reckless provocations and to put an end to the large-scale war that it launched more than 3 years ago on the European continent. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
President, I thank ASG Janša for his briefing and welcome the high-level representatives of Estonia and other relevant countries to the meeting today. President, the airspace incident discussed by the Security Council today and the drone incident discussed a few days ago are both spillover effects of the Ukraine crisis. They reflect the lack of mutual trust and growing suspicions among relevant parties and illustrate the complex and sensitive nature of the current European security situation. As long as the Ukraine crisis remains unresolved and the war continues, similar incidents are likely to reoccur. Therefore, the urgent imperative and fundamental solution are to realize a political resolution to the Ukraine crisis as soon as possible and to build balanced, effective, and sustainable European security architecture. Regarding the Ukraine crisis, we have fully elaborated our position on multiple occasions at the Security Council before. Tomorrow, the Council will hold a high-level meeting on the issue of Ukraine, when China will expand our position again. I will not go into details today. On the airspace incident, China urges the parties concerned to remain calm and exercise restraint, clarify facts and dispel doubts through dialogue and communication, avoid misunderstandings and misjudgments, and prevent the situation from expanding or escalating. We always maintain that countries should follow the purposes and principles of the UN Charter in handling international relations. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to thank ASG Janša for his briefing on the development in the Baltic Sea region. I welcome His Excellency, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Estonia, to this meeting, as well as the representative from the region. Mr. President, the situation in Eastern Europe remains a significant concern, carrying serious implications for regional stability and international norms. The divergent narratives surrounding the events of September 19, which are happening against the backdrop of the ongoing war in the region, underscore the urgency of the situation and the critical need for diplomacy and dialogue. Such incidents highlight the fragility and volatility in the region, reminding us of the fundamental principles enshrined in international law and the United Nations Charter, including the peaceful resolutions of disputes. We firmly maintain that there is no military solution to disagreements over airspace or territorial integrity. Continued escalations only serve to heighten tensions and undermine the process for a durable peace in the region. We believe that lasting solutions are found at the negotiating table, not through acts that can be interpreted as hostile. In this regard, we call upon all parties to exercise maximum restraint and engage in earnest, substantive dialogue. A durable solution will require a genuine commitment to de-escalation, confidence-building measures, and renewed focus for diplomatic efforts. To conclude, Mr. President, my delegation reaffirms its unwavering support for all efforts aimed at upholding the principles of international law and achieving just and lasting solutions consistent with the United Nations Charter. We firmly believe that the people in the region deserve a future defined by peace, security, and stability. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Thank you, President. There was a time when Europe, for many of us, was associated with the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, cutting-edge philosophy, culture, and science. Yet today, all of that, unfortunately, has gone, and it's gone for good. Voltaire, Rousseau, Kant, and other leading philosophers have been replaced with the von der Leyens, the Callises, and the Johnsons, as well as other small-time blinkered Russophobes, thanks to their efforts. The primitive hatred for our country and an attempt to portray Russia as the main threat to pan-European security is, before our very eyes, becoming the only ideology of European states. They're trying their utmost to make the next generation forget the bitter experience of predecessors of today's Euro-integrators. For instance, the experience of Napoleon and Hitler, who suffered defeat at our country's hands, for which Europe paid a lengthy and painful price. Any events are immediately interpreted through an anti-Russian prism. The very idea that war with Russia is unavoidable is being frantically pounded into the heads of the European populace. Russia is being branded all sorts of things, portrayed as an enemy, not even going to the trouble in principle of using facts or evidence. When these assertions turn out to be false, no one even thinks about apologizing for spreading such blatant lies. Today, we will have an excellent opportunity to see this for ourselves, given that in the room we have a lot of European extras. These extras will, as per usual, will be letting their imaginations run wild regarding the threat from Russia. This paranoia has reached never-before-seen heights. Just last week, we were compelled to listen in this chamber to groundless accusations about supposedly Russian UAVs entering Polish airspace. Not a single piece of evidence that these drones were of Russian provenance has been provided to date. It's telling that just a few days later, we heard that the incident involving damage to the roof of a residential house in Lublin province, which was a key component of this anti-Russia campaign, in reality was the result of a missile erroneously being dropped from a Polish fighter jet. The Polish Prime Minister Tusk today recognized that not a single drone that was found contained explosives. Not a single one posed a threat to civilians. For the Polish opposition, it clearly said this is a blatant provocation, the aim being to pull Poland into war. President, we take very seriously allegations against our armed forces. We always try to get the facts, which should allow us to understand what actually happened. This is why, in trying to get to the bottom of the situation, we immediately proposed for the Polish side to engage in bilateral consultations with us. Yet we didn't get a sensible reaction from Warsaw. This attests to only one thing. Neither Warsaw nor Brussels want the truth. All they need is a pretext for a new wave of the Russophobia campaign they're engaged in. It's very difficult to comment. Our European neighbors are inculpating themselves so obviously. Anyone of sound mind, anyone who is familiar with elementary logic would never say such a situation is normal. But yet, if on every screen, in every social media outlet, on every page, you're being told that Russia is your only enemy, then you might start believing anything and everything. The facts, the evidence here are superfluous. Today, we're compelled to be here to watch part 2 of this spectacle entitled Blame Russia for Everything. Our neighbors have now imagined that Russia is at fault for an incursion into Estonian airspace. As always, there is no proof except the Russophobic hysteria coming from Tallinn, which our Estonian colleague will wax lyrical about a little bit later. As for the facts prove that on the 19th of September, 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets conducted a planned flight from Karelia to an airbase in Kaliningrad Oblast, carried out in strict accordance with international airspace use rules. The Russian aircrafts did not stray from the agreed route, nor did they cross into Estonian airspace. Their trajectory, their flight was over the neutral waters of the Baltic Sea, over 3 kilometers from the island of Vindlo. Flight recorded data confirm this. If Estonia wanted to, it could have checked this itself. But Tallinn is not pursuing such an objective. Their goal is different, going against common sense and the facts to foment hysteria and accuse Russia of provocations. Thus, NATO representatives rushed to call what happened reckless behavior. And the head of European diplomacy, who also happens to be Estonian, called for a firm stance in support of the Baltic states. To be perfectly frank, our European colleagues deserve our sympathies. After all, the project they'd been building on our borders for years, the anti-Russia project, and this is what Ukraine was actually turned into after 2014, this project is coming apart at the seams, discrediting itself. Ukraine became the Zelensky concentration camp long ago. It's not sparing its people. They're dying by the thousands every day in a senseless meat grinder in the name of Western geopolitical interests. The Zelensky regime has turned its country into a symbol of corruption, outright theft, violations of human rights, the freedom of religion, and the freedom of speech. In European capitals, despite all of this, they continue to laud so-called Ukrainian achievements, giving money and weapons to the Kiev regime, although they're clearly increasingly ashamed of their own puppets. However, they can't understand how to disentangle themselves from this fix. As a result, not-so-creative Euro bureaucrats have found nothing better to do than to whip up anti-Russian hysteria in the hope that European voters won't notice. This is a strange strategy, and without a doubt, it will achieve the opposite of what it intends to do. What will they accuse Russia of next? After all, they're not bothering to check the evidence nor the logical rationale for our actions. It's hard to think where their imaginations will take us next when no one cares about the facts. President, without a doubt, we understand that the hysteria of our European colleagues is also directed at trying to return the new U.S. administration, including President Trump, to an anti-Russia course. It's aimed at undermining the understandings and undertakings entered into by Russia and the U.S. by their presidents in Alaska a month ago. On this note, I'd like to quote the U.S. Vice President, J.D. Vance, who, at the Munich Security Conference at the start of this year, voiced some uncomfortable conclusions, uncomfortable for Europe. The threat, and here I quote, the threat that I worry about vis-à-vis Europe is not Russia, not China. It's not any other actor, external actor. What I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States, end of quote. Despite this clear-cut diagnosis contained in the aforementioned quote, Europe decided not to listen. Europe today is like an unhinged, paranoid individual unable to respond to criticism. Nor is it able to remember the lessons of history. After all, for the current cast of European leaders and Euro bureaucrats, history was reset to zero in February of 2022. Thus, drawing the lessons of history for today's Europe is bad manners. But this is a very dangerous path. We all know that history is ruthless vis-à-vis those who forget its lessons. Thus, our former European partners, if you want to get hysterical, to foment and to continue levy baseless accusations, go right ahead. But do that without our participation. We won't be partaking in this theatre of the absurd, and you don't need us there. When you decide that you want to engage in a serious discussion about European security, about the fate of our common continent, about how to make this continent prosperous and secure for everybody, we'll be ready. You know where to find us. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are grateful for the detailed presentation of Undersecretary General Janša, providing us with a more complete picture of the events that took place in Estonia on Friday, the 19th of September. And we'd also like to welcome the ministers distinguishing us today with their presence at this meeting. Just a week ago, this council met to consider with concern the incursion